All right, what's going on, everybody? Welcome in to the show. If you are new to the channel, be sure to like and subscribe. All things Steelers, all things NFL, ton of stuff on the channel, so please be sure to do all that YouTube stuff. Biggest thing today on the Steelers front is the ongoing saga between Pittsburgh and Justin Fields, and the closer we get to the new league year without both sides agreeing to a deal, the more it looks like Fields is going to hit the open market and potentially and likely leave Pittsburgh. And the latest report from Alan Saunders of Steelers Now, terrific work by Alan, by the way, one of the very best on the beat. Reporting today, Steelers made an offer to Fields representatives sometime over the last week, but the Steelers and Fields are not particularly close together in terms of the compensation that would be necessary for Fields to forego hitting the open market to re-sign with Pittsburgh. League and team sources told Steelers Now. The New York Jets in particular seem interested in talking to Fields, as he's been widely reported or has been widely reported, and there appears to be an interest from Fields in exploring that option. The combination of interest from New York and the Steelers and Fields not being close together on a contract amount has led to a growing sentiment in league circles that Fields will test the open market next week. So this isn't necessarily surprising that the Steelers would kind of lowball Fields. You know, this is a notoriously cheap organization. And I talked about it on here over the last few weeks, is if it comes down to a few $1,000,000 being where they are differing, then the Steelers shouldn't play the cheap game here. And they should just say, all right, you know what? We want Justin. We'll pay for Justin. And of course, things just can never be simple when it comes to the Steelers. And it looks like he will be hitting the open market as both sides aren't close to agreeing to a deal. And if he does hit the open market, my guess is that he's gone. I think that there's going to be real interest from the Jets. There's going to be real interest from Fields in joining the Jets. They'll give him the money that he wants, and he'll go to New York to be their starting quarterback under the new regime of Aaron Glenn in 2025. And, you know, if that does happen, obviously wishing nothing but the best for Justin Fields and hope he has a lot of success. But then it leaves Pittsburgh, Russell Wilson more than likely. And that is not what I want. It's not what a lot of Steelers fans want. We saw what that looks like. We saw the peak of it, which the peak was great. But then inevitably, we saw what the absolute divot of it looks like. And that's losing your last 5 games and the offense looking awful. And so the Steelers are really doing themselves a disservice if Fields isn't the one under center in 2025, and they're just running this thing back. Not just with Russell Wilson. They've made almost no changes to this team whatsoever in terms of they could have fired Pat Meyer, the offensive line coach. They didn't. He came back. The only people that left were Grady Brown and Aaron Curry, who were 2 of the more promising assistants on the staff. Everyone else is brought back. Terrell Austin brought back. Pat Meyer kept around. Now, other guys like Tom Arth, the quarterback's coach, I think that he was more than deserving to stick around. Zach Azzani, the receivers coach, for what he was working with, the Steelers receivers, I think at least exceeded expectations. He got a lot out of Calvin Austin. But Pat Meyer, there's no reason he should be there. And the other 2 coaches leaving for greener pastures, can't blame them for doing it. But this all comes back to the Steelers organization just being incredibly inept. They are a team that unfortunately is barred by a cheap owner and a head coach that is stuck living in 2008. And this is an organization that is riding horseback when there's cars on the road. They are so stuck in the past. And For as much as people want to, not play the game of saying, oh, they're content being this mediocre team. Well, until they do something that says otherwise, that's going to be the narrative, and rightfully so. And running things back with a 37-year-old quarterback isn't exactly forward thinking. Like with Fields, I don't know if he would be the answer. There's a very good chance he won't be. But I would rather them test that out with a 25-year-old or 26-year-old who has a lot of upside in terms of athleticism. And you can at least sell me the fact that Artie's 26. We're going to give him a year to prove whether or not he's the guy going forward. We'll put some weapons around him to save him any sort of excuse of not being able to succeed. We'll really give him the ball and say, look, make or break. And if he isn't, well, then at least you can say you tried with a young guy, and then you can go into 2026 with whoever you draft, and he'll have weapons around him. Right now, like, if you bring back Russell Wilson, it is just waving the white flag of saying, hey, that's probably going to be what we did last year. So strap in. I know a lot of Steelers fans don't want to hear it, but I would much rather have Aaron Rodgers than Russell Wilson. Much rather have Aaron Rodgers. Because at least with Aaron Rodgers, like, he's better than Russell Wilson still. The Jets didn't have a great year last year, but Aaron Rodgers didn't have a horrible year. 28 touchdowns, 11 picks. I'll take that. And at least it's something different. Might be a little bit chaotic at times, but I would rather them be like mediocre and chaotic than mediocre and boring. At least give me some fun. Like Russell Wilson, if you bring back Russell Wilson, the ceiling is so low. I think the ceiling is what we saw last year. That's what we've seen for the past 8 years. Getting to the wild card round. If you get into the playoffs at all, you're backing in. And then when you face one of the actually good teams in the NFL, you'll get the hell beat out of you, and then the cycle will repeat. And like I said, a lot of Steelers fans don't like the narrative that they're content with that, but until proven otherwise, that's going to be the narrative, and rightfully so. They have a very cheap owner. They have a head coach who's stuck in the past, and as long as both of them are there, the ceiling on the Steelers will be low. And if they let Justin Fields leave, and look, I'm never going to be a guy who like pounds the table that Justin Fields is like a top 10 quarterback. That would be idiotic. But I will say it makes a lot more sense to give him a full year of trying to show that he can be the long-term answer rather than running it back with Russell Wilson. There's going to be so many people that say, well, they tried in Chicago, and it didn't work out. Look, man, plenty of quarterbacks over the last handful of years have shown that if you put them in the right situation, they can live up to their full potential. Geno Smith was a backup in the league for damn near a decade. And then when he got a shot with Seattle to be the starter, he played good football. Baker Mayfield bounced around the league, was with 3 different teams in a calendar year, then landed in Tampa, led them to the playoffs 2 consecutive years, won a playoff game over the Eagles last year, and then this past season threw 40 touchdowns and led Tampa Bay back to the playoffs. When Baker Mayfield was sent to Carolina, nobody expected that he would be capable of doing that. Sam Darnold. Very similar path to Baker Mayfield. Flamed out with the Jets, bounced around from Carolina to San Francisco and then to Minnesota. And then in the right situation, threw 35 touchdowns and led the Vikings to 14 wins. I think what Justin Fields needs is an offense that fits his abilities, which Arthur Smith's offense does. And he showed that in the 6 games that he started. And again, he wasn't setting the world on fire, but 10 total touchdowns, only 1 pick. Like, that's above average quarterback play. I'll take that. And I would rather see a full season of that than a guy who ruffled some feathers in the organization. Arthur Smith doesn't want to work with him again. I can promise you that much. And there's plenty of guys in the building who he legitimately pissed off with reports of his strained relationship with Arthur Smith getting leaked. And it just doesn't make sense why you would lowball the guy that you highly reportedly want, why you just lowball him, knowing that he'll hit the open market and that there's another team that has severe interest in him and has a chance to steal him away. It just doesn't make sense. And the Steelers, being notoriously cheap as they are, and just reverting back to the most boring, safe means as possible. We're going back to Russell Wilson. Should they not be able to bring back Justin Fields? It's just incredibly frustrating as a fan. Because, again, we saw the Russell Wilson thing. Didn't work. You're going to keep just banging your head against that wall for another year. And as Aditi Kinkwabala of CBS Sports reported, there were guys that didn't want Fields to get pulled last year. And when they started to struggle, there were guys in the building, both coaches and players, that wanted to go back to Fields. And Mike Tomlin said no. So the hierarchy of the Steelers, man, it's incredibly frustrating as a fan because they are capable. You'd like to think that they are capable of making smarter decisions and being a more progressive franchise. But unfortunately, they have decision makers in the owner, Art Rooney, the head coach, Mike Tomlin, who still think it's 1996 in terms of how you build a team and try to win. You can't do it that way. Can't do it. See a lot of comments here, so we'll start getting to some of those real quick. Anthony says, I believe he re-signs with Pittsburgh. We will force them to bet on Fields and build a team around him. That's why Arthur Smith chose to return. I hope so. I certainly hope Fields ends up being the guy that comes back, obviously. But I think that if he hits the open market, visits New York, that I think that there's a very good chance he leaves. And another thing that Aditi pointed out was that there could very well be a mistrust there with Justin Fields and Mike Tomlin. Because, again, he wasn't playing, lights out top 5 quarterback football in the first 6 games, but they were in position to win all 6 of those games, and Fields played fairly well. Like in the Colts game, sloppy first half. In the second half, he put the team on his back, yanked them from being 24-3, and they're within a possession of winning the game. And if George Pickens doesn't fumble in the red zone in that game, they win. He completes the comeback and they win. Against Dallas, if the defense doesn't let the Cowboys go in an 18-play drive at the end of the game after the Steelers took the lead, they win that game. So I'd understand if there's a mistrust. And if I'm Justin Fields, like, I understand if he leaves and goes to an organization where they make him feel a little bit more loved and give him the reassurance that he needs of, like, yeah, dude, like, if you sign here, you are going to be our guy this year. So I'd understand if he leaves. Don't want him to, but I get it. After Mike Tomlin's blind loyalty to Russell Wilson for whatever reason. And look, it paid off at the beginning. Not saying it didn't. My buddy Chris Carter pointed that out on Twitter, that, when they pulled Russ, the offense, in terms of the passing game, took a step forward, and it absolutely did. But then once they hit that incredibly cold period at the end of the year, they had multiple chances to turn back to Fields and say, look, man, we're going to see if you can give us a little bit of a spark here. And they just kept banging their head against the same wall. So I'd understand if Justin Fields doesn't trust Mike Tomlin. Because if I was in his shoes, I'd probably feel the same way. Matt says, it looks to me that they want Aaron Rodgers. The actions speak louder than words. Like I said, I'd be totally okay if Aaron Rodgers does end up being the guy if it isn't Fields. And I would much prefer it to be Aaron Rodgers over Russell Wilson. Tim says, nothing new, same old standard in Pittsburgh. Unfortunately, it is the new standard in Pittsburgh, isn't it? Where just being mediocre and getting 9 or 10 wins, that seems to be what the standard is now. Tim also says, if they bring Aaron Rodgers, I'm done with Pittsburgh. Yeah, I know a lot of people, I know I'm in the minority when it comes to like actually wanting Aaron Rodgers. So I completely recognize that. my top two options right now would be Fields, Rodgers. Sam Darnold would probably be 3. I think he ends up going somewhere else like Seattle or maybe Tennessee. T-Man says, I don't blame Justin for leaving. Mike T is too loyal to bums. Ain't that the truth? Ain't that the truth? And another thing that like a lot of Tomlin defenders will get angry that you say like he only hires yes men as his assistant coaches. He had every opportunity at the end of the year to get rid of a lot of those guys. Could have got rid of Terrell Austin. Could have got rid of Pat Meyer. Didn't do it. So like that's another one of those tropes that's going to, some people might say it's unfair, but it's going to ring true until proven otherwise. You could have let go Terrell Austin and made a move to try to hire Lou Anarumo. Would have been a great hire, and say he goes to Indianapolis. You have plenty of guys. Could have hired. He's not a great head coach, but he's a good defensive-minded coach. You could have went out and got Matt Eberflus. And you didn't do that either. Like Mike Tomlin surrounds himself with yes men who aren't ever going to be a threat. And that's just, again, until proven otherwise, that's just going to be the facts of it. He could have moved on from Terrell Austin and just promoted Brian Flores to defensive coordinator when he was in the building. Like there's plenty of opportunities he's had to hire actually good assistants in terms of coordinators and just hasn't. Adonis says, we are actually in a terrible place right now. We sure are as fans. We sure are. Adonis also adds, I'm not used to what a losing season is like, but if that's what needs to happen for the culture to change, I'm all for it. Yeah, that's another thing. Like I've said this before, like I would much rather be a fan of a team like the 49ers, right? Where they are consistently in NFC championship games, getting to the Super Bowl, and like every 3 or 4 years, they just have a year where they fall off because attrition takes over and a bunch of guys get injured. They're just tired from playing basically an entire other season worths of games over the past few years. And so naturally, you're going to have a fall off and you're going to have a down year where you only win 6 or 7 games. But then that gives you the opportunity to get a little bit more rested. You have a high draft pick. You get another good player in the building, and then you build back up to getting to NFC championship games again, getting back to the Super Bowl. Like I would much rather have that than consistently winning 9 games, drafting 17th, 18th, 19th every year, and knowing that the ceiling is just mediocre. So the next person, by the way, who says, oh man, Steelers fans should be so grateful, I'm going to hit him with a brick. That is the most annoying thing to hear right now as a fan. Right now, there's zero to be grateful for with the current state of the Steelers. Absolutely nothing. No playoff win in 8 years. Here's a fun little timeline. Since they won their last playoff game, Doug Peterson led the Eagles to the Super Bowl, got fired by the Eagles, got hired by the Jaguars, won a playoff game with the Jaguars, and then got fired by the Jaguars. All of that happened in the span since Mike Tomlin won his last playoff game. Same thing for Dan Quinn. Dan Quinn took the Falcons to the Super Bowl, got fired by the Falcons, became the Cowboys defensive coordinator, became the Commanders head coach, won a playoff game with the Commanders, who, by the way, hadn't won a playoff game in 20 years. All of that has happened since Mike Tomlin won his last playoff game. It is so, so bad. And by the way, this is the longest stretch that the Steelers have ever gone without winning a playoff game since 1969 or in the Super Bowl era. Back in like the 30s and 40s or whatever and 50s when they were horrible. That's a completely other story. In the Super Bowl era. Kalo says, not going to lie, we got it good compared to Jets fans. That's the bar now, man. We could be the Jets. The Jets have as many playoff wins in the last 8 years as the Steelers do, man. Like, that can't be the bar. You can't, we could be the Jets. That can't be where we set the bar. Absolutely not. And is that a factual statement? Sure. But that doesn't all of a sudden make things good. When the only thing that you can say about the state of the franchise is, well, they're better than the Jets. That's sure, but that's not exactly saying much. I know there was one earlier that I missed, so let me get back up here. Joey, all right. Joey says, I was 10 the last time they won a playoff game. That's crazy. Yeah, it would have been my senior year in high school the last time they won a playoff game. So that tells you just, how long it's been. And it's incredibly, incredibly frustrating. Joey also said, I know Mark Caboli said a couple days ago, 70% chance he was coming back. Did that change? I mean, I'm not going to pretend to know like who Caboli talks to in terms of those things. So I don't know. But in terms of what's going on right now, like I said at the top of the show, Alan Saunders of Steelers Now reporting that the Steelers and Fields, they're not close on a deal. It looks very likely that he's going to hit the open market, and the Jets have a lot of interest. Should he hit the open market, I believe he'll go to the Jets. So that's my thought process right now. I'll take this opportunity to also say, if you want to support the channel even more, you can leave super chats and do all that fun stuff. By no means do you have to. But if you'd like to, that would make my little heart happy. Terry says, I just don't understand why nothing has been done yet with the quarterback. Who wants to bet they roll it back with Russell Wilson? That's certainly what it looks like they are going to do. Again, that's not a guarantee that if Fields hits the open market that he'll leave. I just personally speaking, I think if he hits the open market, he's going to go to the Jets. That's just my personal bet. Standard is the standard. Sick of the Tomlin era. Yeah, I think that two things can be true. He accomplished a lot in the early portion of his tenure in Pittsburgh. You got to remember, he started off his career with the Steelers 5-1 in the playoffs. Like, he lost his first playoff game to Jacksonville. Then they won 5 straight playoff games in the Tomlin era. Like, there was a time where this style worked. Now, it would also help that you have Ben Roethlisberger on your team. A Hall of Fame quarterback shields a lot of issues, but you can't. It almost feels like, I mean, I wasn't alive for this, but like the post-Bradshaw era where they just went through bad quarterback after bad quarterback just trying to rely on defense. You can't do that in today's game, man. You can win some regular season games and be like a mediocre regular season team, but if you get into the playoffs with that thing, with that situation, you don't have a chance. So, and look, I applauded them last year for how they handled the quarterback situation because it showed that they were willing to take risks, and they deserve credit for that. If I'm going to be critical, I'm going to give the credit where it's due. And last year they deserved it. Bringing in Russell Wilson, I thought that was a solid signing. Trading for Justin Fields, I thought that was a great move. You completely revamped your quarterback room. And that was great. But now you have to recognize, all right, this thing with Russ didn't work. He was our quarterback the vast majority of the year. We lost 5 straight games with him under center. We'll do all we can to sign Justin Fields. And instead they're lowballing him and expecting him to just take a deal, and it just doesn't make sense. All right, I know a lot of comments coming in, so let me just scroll back up here. I wouldn't expect a playoff win for at least 2 years. I'm disgusted with their choices lately, says Matt. Yeah. Last year, I said going into the year, if they won a playoff game, huge success. I didn't go in with Super Bowl expectations or anything like that. I thought that was a realistic way of setting some goals, is just win a playoff game. End the drought, win a playoff game, and 2024 will be a massive success. They're sitting at 10-3, and I think even I was like, all right, you know what? If they keep playing like this, they can win more than one playoff game. They can maybe make a run at this thing, and then everything just falls apart. And I blame myself for being that optimistic. So I think that in terms of what happens next, like if they bring back Russ, I just don't see this drought ending. if they bring back Aaron Rodgers, I'm more optimistic for Aaron Rodgers and his ability to maybe end this drought than I am Russell Wilson, just because, like I said, we saw what Russell Wilson looks like. I just don't think that works. So I'm open for Aaron Rodgers. Lawrence says, I heard from a Jets podcast they planned to offer Justin $10 million for a 2-year contract. The Steelers can't match $20 million. They're just plain cheap. I think that Fields, so the $10 million a year, that's what Sam Darnold got with the Vikings. So I think that there could be some similarities there. I would expect him to get a little bit more because, like, when Darnold got his deal, he hardly played in San Francisco. He got in that Ravens game on Christmas when they were just getting the hell beat out of him. But he didn't play a ton. With Justin, he played 6 games and he played well in those 6 games. So I would expect a little bit more than $10 million a year for Justin Fields. I'd say somewhere between like 13 and 15 a year is what I would expect for him, maybe even a little bit more. And I'm sure that's what his agent David Malgetta is trying to do, is just get him every dollar possible, which is, that's what an agent's supposed to do, and he's doing his job. But it's also been widely reported that Justin wants to stay in Pittsburgh, but at the same time, he's not just going to take any deal that they give him. Like, he wants fair compensation for that. So I would expect it to be more than $10 million a year. And if it does come out, like, let's say that he does go to the Jets and it's for $10 million a year, then that means that the Steelers were offering him probably like $7 million a year and getting pissed that he wouldn't take that. And that's ridiculous. If that is what happens, we'll see soon enough. Tim adds, I won't be watching Steelers games this year. I don't blame you, Tim. I don't blame you. And look, for me, like, as a guy who covers the Bills pretty extensively, and I'm pretty open that Josh Allen's my favorite player in the league. I've developed a nice love for Buffalo, where they're not my favorite team. Pittsburgh's always going to be my favorite team, but they've been a nice aside for me over the last couple of years, where I know I can watch my favorite player on a different team and still find joy in the season and covering the league. So I don't blame you there. My dad actually texted me like a week ago. He's like, I'm just going to become a Bills fan. I'm like, hey man, that's certainly an option. Fields won't do that. This is a bluff. Fields knows if he goes to the Jets, his career is over. At least with the Steelers, he's going to continue to get a chance because of our floor. I think from a fan's perspective, I can understand where you're coming from with that. Like, the built-in risk of going to the Jets, that's a real thing. And I know I've spent the last half hour crapping on the Steelers and their process, but I will say at least they're a buttoned-up organization that's at least stable. So I can see where you're coming from with that. But as a player, if he visits the Jets and they make him feel wanted and they make it known that he's their guy, that does a lot for a player, instilling confidence. And I think, like Aditi Kinkwabala pointed out, there could be some lingering feelings from Justin Fields that he doesn't trust Mike Tomlin because of how last season went down. And he handled it the right way. He said all the right things. He was very mature about it. But inside, you're still a human being. I'm sure that he felt a certain way about it, and rightfully so. So I think that if the Jets make him feel wanted, make him feel loved, give him more money, I think it's very real that he goes there. Adonis says, I was in 4th grade when the Steelers won a playoff game. Now I'm a senior in high school. Dan Rooney should have fired Tomlin. Look, man, it's, this whole drought is a pain in the butt. We all know that. In terms of Tomlin, I've tried to not, bring up the fact that they should move on from him, just because I know that they're not going to. That's going to be his job as long as he wants it, which is incredibly frustrating because if you look at the other side of the state, they've won 2 Super Bowls in the span since the Steelers have last won a playoff game because they're so progressive and they're so on top of things. Doug Peterson won a Super Bowl. 2 years later, he was gone because Howie Roseman saw, this isn't working, immediately getting rid of him. So, the Steelers would never do that. The reason that they've been so successful is because of how progressive they are. How, with the A.J. Brown trade, they saw, we can go get A.J. Brown. We're going to go get A.J. Brown. We'll trade a 1st-round pick for him, sure. And it's not just with A.J. Brown. They drafted Jalen Hurts. They paid Carson Wentz a ton of money. As soon as they saw, this isn't going to work with Carson Wentz, we're going to trade him. We'll eat the dead money. It is what it is. We'll move forward with Jalen Hurts. They are just so... They're not afraid to admit when they get things wrong. They have backup plans. They're great at team building. They are the complete antithesis of what the Steelers are right now. And that's why they've won 2 Super Bowls since the Steelers last won a playoff game. It's a pain in the butt. Matt says, I don't blame Fields, especially after what Tomlin did to Pickett last year. Yes, Pickett wasn't good, but was told one thing and actions were different. Yeah, I mean, I'm notoriously a Kenny Pickett hater. Not necessarily the guy. I don't know Kenny as a person, but as a quarterback, I could have done a standing backflip last year when I got the notification that they traded him. I was so elated and so happy. But I get what you're saying in terms of, if players are told one thing and, coaches go back on that. The Tomlin defense is stale. Poor X's and O's. Khan needs to sack up and sign Fields. I agree. Everything with Mike Tomlin is stale. He might be a good leader of men, and that's great. But in terms of in-game, when it comes to beating great teams, the Steelers aren't going to do that as long as he's there, in my opinion. Kevin Adams posted this great question. It was a while ago. It wasn't recently, but I do remember. When's the last time the Steelers had like a truly big win that didn't come against a divisional opponent? Like a truly huge win against a very good team. It was probably New England in 2018. Was that the last time? It's certainly what it feels like. Because even when they started 11-0, like they beat Baltimore, sure, but that's a divisional game. They beat the Cowboys, but Dak Prescott was hurt and they weren't a good team that year. They beat Tennessee, but like Tennessee is, even when they were at their peak, that wasn't a team that was looked at in the same regards as like Kansas City and Buffalo. Like that was still a second tier team. Like, was that the last time they had like a truly huge win was against New England in 2018, which ultimately ended up meaning nothing because they missed the playoffs that year because they lost so many games down the stretch? I think that's the last big game that they won. So that puts a lot in perspective as well. Tim says it's going to be another QB they'll shaft like they did with Mason Rudolph and now Fields. I mean, look, Mason Rudolph, I'll always love Mason Rudolph because he helped get rid of Kenny Pickett, but let's not act like Mason Rudolph is like the savior and a franchise quarterback. Like we just saw what he did in Tennessee. It's not like I like Mason Rudolph, not a franchise quarterback. Only fan noise can get Art Rooney to retire at this point. Even then, man, like I just don't think he cares. Like I don't think he cares that fans are pissed. He'll keep making money. Doesn't matter to him. Donna says nothing's going to change. We all know it. A losing season would be a blessing in disguise, and most fans will realize it. I think most fans would realize that at this point. 100% agree. Tomlin wants Rodgers and an old 43-year-old. Look, man. Like I said, I would take Rodgers over Russ at this point. Jacob says Steelers want to pay Justin Fields $15 million, but expect the production of someone making over 40. Well, look, there's not going to be a quarterback available this cycle or right now that is going to be that's going to give you the production of a franchise quarterback. I think Fields is probably your best bet just because he's been in the system, and if you put weapons around him and cater the offense to what he does well, he can play well. But there's not a quarterback available that is going to turn your franchise around. That's just not available this year. Some people might say Sam Darnold. I think that we saw the real Sam Darnold stand up in the last 2 weeks of the year when he just completely folded like a lawn chair against Detroit and Los Angeles. So makes sense keeping Fields. Now, look, if he's not the guy, then at least you tried and you know that, and you can draft a quarterback in a very quarterback-heavy class of 2026. Maybe even trade up for one, like a lot of good teams have. The Chiefs traded up for Mahomes. The Bills traded up for Allen. The Ravens traded up for Lamar. Like, if you want a franchise quarterback, you can't just piss and moan at, when you're drafting 20th and expect one to fall to you. So you got to be able to get aggressive and go up there and get your guy. This is still a negotiation. Omar deserves the benefit of the doubt. Let him cook. Omar's not Kevin Colbert. Omar's not Kevin Colbert, and I know that. But at the same time, Omar is starting to coast off of a Chase Claypool trade that happened a while ago, and I need to see some more from Omar. Now, granted, he did get Fields for a 6th round pick, so fair enough. Bill sacrificed a lot to get an amazing quarterback in the draft. That is Josh Allen. It took him 3 years to get elite, but he still got there. Yeah, and Brandon Beane last year had a great quote at the combine where somebody asked him about the risks of trading up for a quarterback, and he said, "Well, the risk is that if he ends up not working, then you're probably going to get fired. But if he ends up being great, then nobody's going to give a shit what you traded for him because you got a great quarterback." So I really appreciated that transparency from a GM when it comes to, if this doesn't work, I'm probably going to get fired. But if I don't have a quarterback, I'll probably get fired anyway. So I may as well try to get one that I think will be good. Jonathan says, Rodgers is better than Russ at this moment. Yes, he is. There you go, Jonathan. Hop on the train. Not mobile enough, he'll get sacked 50 times. I'm assuming you're talking about Aaron Rodgers. I think that won't be 50 times. The problem with Russ and Justin Fields too, to be fair, is that sometimes they just hold on to the ball way too long rather than just admit that a play's dead, throw it away, and live for another day. Aaron Rodgers is good at just saying, all right, this is dead. I'm just going to throw this away and we'll try again on the next play. Fields and Wilson aren't necessarily good at that. But the thing with Fields is that last year he did that a lot, and a lot of times it resulted in nice runs. There were times against Indianapolis where it resulted in a horribly stupid sack. But with Russ, he just thinks that he's 26 still when he's not, and he's not as mobile as he used to be, and it cost him a lot. I see a lot of people commenting. So if you want your comment read aloud, drop it as a super chat, and that'll make sure that you get on. Like I said, a lot of comments to get through. So I think that's probably going to be how we'll do this the rest of the episode is if you want your comment read, leave a super chat and we'll get it up. But yeah, I think that the overwhelming feeling with the fan base right now is frustration, and rightfully so. This is a franchise that hasn't won a playoff game in 8 years, tries to cut corners and be cheap. Though fans will complain about, oh man, they're not getting high-level production out of these players. Well, when you're not willing to spend high-level money, you can't expect high-level production. If you're going to pay for Walmart brand, you can't expect Gucci levels of production. You got to spend money in order to yield those results. And Pittsburgh hasn't been a team that's been willing to spend money. And until they are, Patrick Queen is the most expensive external signing in franchise history, and he's making $14 million a year. That should tell you all you need to know about how comfortable they are spending money. They don't do it. All of their big contracts have been guys that they've drafted, and that's good. In terms of Ben's contract, Antonio Brown's contract, TJ Watt, Cam Hayward, they drafted all those guys, and that's great. But the other side of that coin is a team like the Rams, who just said, instead of using draft picks, we're just going to go buy a bunch of really good players that we know are great, and we'll win a Super Bowl that way. And it worked the first year they did it. I said, we're going to get Matthew Stafford. We'll bring in Odell Beckham. We'll bring in Von Miller, Jalen Ramsey. We know that they're all great. Now we'll just build a team like that. And the first year they did it, they won a Super Bowl. So you got to be willing to spend some money. Now, the Rams are the extreme side of that coin. And I'm not saying that you got to go full Rams with it, though I wouldn't be opposed to that. But I know the Steelers will never do that. But if you want some success, you can't just say, we're going to build through the draft and we'll make some, mid-tier signings, and that's how we'll do it. That was the Kevin Colbert plan. It didn't work. Omar is better than Kevin Colbert in that regard, but they still have a ways to go in terms of getting better when it comes to that. So it's a pain. It's a big old pain. And it's frustrating. Like the other team in Pittsburgh, like the Penguins, they're just fully embracing a rebuild. And like the trade deadline, that was fun to monitor. Now they've got 1 billion picks over the next couple years to try to build a winner, and that's fun. With the Steelers, the Steelers are like the most successful version of the Saints that you can be, where the Saints do the same thing every year. They kick a bunch of cap down the road. They make a bunch of mid-tier signings, all to win like 6 games. The Steelers do that and still manage to win 9 or 10, but it keeps them at that spot forever. Like they're so afraid of a losing season that they've done themselves more harm than good by consistently winning that many games. So it's frustrating. I get it. And it's something that, keep monitoring. I'm still like refreshing my phone, seeing if something gets reported that somewhere out of the blue, the Steelers signed Fields. Wouldn't that be nice? But nothing yet. Excuse me. But again, if you want your comments read, leave a super chat. There's a lot of them coming in right now. Appreciate everybody for tuning in, by the way. And like I said, if you're not already subscribed to the channel, be sure to do that. Now that the off season is here, now that free agency is coming, doing a lot more Steelers centric shows like we did last year. If you've been a watcher since last year, when I really started like the YouTube thing, did a lot of Steelers shows per week. And you can also watch my national pod, the Pump Fake, on this channel as well. Me and my good friend JP Acosta recently did a show predicting where certain players were going to sign / get traded. So that's on the channel. You can also listen to the Pump Fake wherever you get your podcasts as well. So again, if you're not already subscribed, please be sure to do that and follow along with everything Steelers related on here. We'll be doing it all off season. I try to do at least 1 or 2 during the regular season. Obviously, that's a lot more busy than now. So follow along for all the NFL related content on the channel. Nice little shameless plug there. So we'll see what comes of it with Justin. And if you're just now tuning in and are like, oh man, Justin Fields is leaving, the reason that I feel that way is report from Alan Saunders of Steelers Now, who today reported the Steelers made an offer to Fields' representatives sometime over the last week, but the Steelers and Fields are not particularly close together in terms of the compensation that would be necessary for Fields to forego hitting the open market to re-sign with Pittsburgh. The New York Jets in particular seem interested in talking to Fields, as has been widely reported, and there appears to be an interest from Fields in exploring that option. So that is where all this speculation has come from. And for what it's worth, during the combine, I reported that it felt likely that Russell Wilson would be returning to the Steelers. I was told that, yes, Fields is their first option, but there was some worries that he would hit the open market. So that is what opened up conversations with Russell Wilson. And I was told that they put a deal in front of him. It just depends on whether or not he takes it or not. We'll see what they end up doing at the quarterback position as a whole. Obviously, they would prefer to keep Justin Fields. That has been widely reported by just about everybody humanly possible. But it just seems so dumb to me that they'll talk about, oh, yeah, we really want Justin. We're not going to pay him what he wants, though. I'm like, all right, dude. Way to talk out of both sides of your mouth. All right, I did want to highlight this because Matt said, when's an AFC North talk coming back? Love, you're talking to Q, Sonny, and Ace. We will be coming back with a show this week. So free agency is coming. AFC North talk will be back this week. Me, Q, Sonny, and Ace will be back on AFC North talk to talk about all of it. So rest assured, we took a little break after the Super Bowl just because, this is kind of a little bit of a dead period, but now that things are picking up and the new league year has basically started because teams are starting to re-sign, trades and whatnot are getting worked out and will become official once the new league year starts. So we'll be back this week with the show. We're still figuring out the details on when we'll start things back up, but it'll be this coming week for sure. So go subscribe to the AFC North Talk channel as well. Hopefully I have a lot to be happy about on that show. Like Myles Garrett getting traded, preferably to the Buffalo Bills. and I can watch Josh Allen hopefully win a Super Bowl. The Bengals, by the way, I mean, that's another team where, all right, Trey Hendrickson probably getting traded. They're trying to figure out a long-term deal for T. Higgins, which is, good for them. But defensively, if they trade Trey Hendrickson, they have nobody on that side of the ball. They don't have an edge rusher. Their secondary stinks. Their goal is just going to be like, all right, we're going to have to win 45-42 every week. And that is what we must do. And even then, they tried doing that last year, and it didn't work. I think there were 4 games where they scored more than 30 and they lost. That's crazy. All right, well, let's trade Trey Hendrickson then. All right. Good luck, Duke Tobin. Have fun. Baltimore, Ronnie Stanley probably leaving. They'll have to do more offensive line retooling like they did a little bit last year. Defensively, they'll need to add another corner. Brandon Stevens is leaving, but Brandon Stevens isn't good. So if they can put somebody opposite of Nate Wiggins and keep Marlon Humphrey in the slot, I'm sure that will be a priority for them. So, I mean, the Steelers are far from the only team in the AFC North with troubles, but they also don't have Joe Burrow or Lamar Jackson. So I have a little bit more faith in those teams just because their quarterbacks are good. And like I said during, to kick off the show, I'm not going to pound the table here and say, oh, Justin Fields can be a top 10 quarterback, because I don't think he can. I think he can be like a top 14 to 16 quarterback. I think right now he's hovering between like 18 and 22. And even then, 18 might be a little bit high. He's probably closer to, 22 to 23, 24. I'll have my list at some point this offseason, which you can read on USA Today. But I do think that in the right system, like plenty of other guys over the past few years, like Baker Mayfield, Geno Smith, Sam Darnold, you put him in the right spot, the right organization, right players, his full potential can be reached. And I think that full potential at this point is being anywhere from the 14th to 17th best quarterback in football. But it's just a pain that the Steelers are, saying, oh yeah, we want Justin Fields, but we're not gonna pay him what he wants. And just the talking out of both sides of their mouth, man, it's frustrating. And this entire organization is frustrating. Not watching your favorite team win a playoff game for 8 years is frustrating. And watching them stick to their same ways that haven't worked in those 8 years is frustrating. So I think that's probably a good place to wrap it up. Like I said, if you're not already subscribed to the channel, please be sure to do so. Lots of Steelers talk throughout the week, multiple times a week. The Pump Fake, my national podcast, a lot of that, at least 2 episodes of that per week I try to do, especially during the high points of the off season and during the regular season. So for all of that content, be sure to subscribe. Follow me on Twitter at JBaileyNFL. If you're not on Twitter anymore and you want to follow me somewhere else, I'm trying to do more on the old Blue Sky app. So you can follow me at the same handle there, JBaileyNFL, on Blue Sky as well. But the best way to support me is to subscribe to the channel. What else have I got coming? I'll have, I don't know if it's out yet or not, wrote a piece for USA Today's Touchdown Wire predicting one free agent signing for every team. So when that's up, go and read that before the new league year starts. We'll see how many I get right. Behind the Steel Curtain, all the coverage there as well, where I'm the deputy editor. A lot of hats that I wear, ladies and gentlemen, but that's what you got to do to make a living doing this. So I appreciate everybody for tuning in. Again, subscribe to the channel for more Steelers talk, more NFL talk throughout the week. AFC North talk will be coming back this coming week as well. Appreciate you all. Enjoy the rest of your days. Talk soon.